Disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing, nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips a balance in favor of fair use. Okay, you guys, this is from Brighton and Hove Psychotherapy, I think perhaps in the UK, dated August 6, 2023. The psychological impact on children who grew up in cults. I have just watched the latest Netflix docuseries, How to Become a Cult Leader, and was pleased to see that images of the cult I grew up in appear in it with frequency, because it means it is undoubtedly and widely recognized as a cult. Familiar images of the cult leader doing energy darshans, so-called transmission of energy, with his disciples, who in turn look utterly blissful. It's love bombing. Was designed to portray him as someone who holds special powers and cures people's suffering instantly. Always just be very wary of people like that. That's a fact. Indoctrination from an early age. The indoctrination of children in cults differs from that of adults in that children are extremely vulnerable to adult influence. The people they look up to, especially their parents. Children's brains are still developing, and they are like sponges, absorbing the world around them, the world of adults who create the environment they exist in. A child will absorb the worldview of those around her and accept this as her reality because this is all she has known, That's the plan. The cult's leader's demands always come first, just like a narcissist. In cults, the cult leader or doctrine, like LRH, L. Ron Hubbard. In cults, the cult leader or doctrine always takes priority over anything else. The child who grows up in a cult will never be the center of attention in her parents' world because they most likely will be totally self-absorbed with the cult leader and the cult demands. These demands are usually great and unattainable because the leader is likely to be highly perfectionistic, insatiable, and persecutory of those who do not meet his or her ideals. KRs, anyone? Snitch culture, anyone? Ethics handling, anyone? Moreover, a cult leader will employ fear tactics, like suppress the people, like be careful of the psychs, like squirrel squads, like if you learn about the OT level, you're going to get pneumonia and die, or if you talk to someone who's PTS, you're going to get sick and die. With their disciples and keep them in a state of perpetual adoration. What would LRH do? Towards him and shame towards themselves. In this state of fear, shame, and total preoccupation with another, there is no room for the age-appropriate demands of a child. Henceforth, children are adults in small bodies. Produce slave, produce slave, produce slave. Who actually needs their parents' care and attention. Yes, Scientology parents, you should be listening. Have no needs. Oh, they've just perfected that in Scientology. Perfected it. A child who grows up in a cult learns to have no needs because she quickly learns that they do not matter. That's snuffing out all the individuality. To survive in the cult and gain some crumbs of attention from her parents, she will have no choice but conform to the leader's demands. Oh, we're so proud of you. You're in the Sea Org. We're so proud of you. You're in the Sea Org. Try to fit in as much as possible. Read Jenna Miscavige's book, please. And override her natural developmental needs. This means the child will miss out on normal stages of development, if not also on education and normal peer interactions, because of the insular and isolated nature of most cults. Isolation and abuse. Sending a child to school means interacting with the outside world. Sounding familiar, Scientology? Which most cults find threatening. Facts. Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Children of God, Children of the Sun, the Moonies. Where to begin? Depending on how isolated a cult becomes, they will supply their own schooling. Scientology schools where they are children and cover it up. Good times. Have children interact only with other cult children. Can't talk with suppressives. Can't talk with the WOGs. And make sure there is no outside influence. Like you can only deal with Scientology businesses. You can only have friends in Scientology because the other people don't understand. They're evil. They're your enemy. Only interact with other cult children and make sure there's no outside influence that could lead the child to question her upbringing. Keeping a child isolated from society also makes her vulnerable to abuse. Miriam Francis, Nathan Rich, Jorge Avila, Mike Brown, Lara FM. Who else? Nora Ames, Liz Ferris, Natalie Webster. Vulnerable to abuse, sexual, spiritual, physical, emotional, and psychological isolated groups create their own rules. Scientology. And decide what is right or wrong. In the cult I grew up in, for instance, children and teenagers were conveniently seen and treated as adults. Oh, there you go, you guys. Say anyone? This meant that we were required to work long hours, Sea Org, staff members, or even the public Scientology children that go to school, to a public school. Sometimes they go to Scientology school, and then after school, around 5 or 5:30, they are forced to read LRH materials for 5 hours. Not go to the playground and play. Not play with their friends. Not do fun children's stuff. Read LRH material until about 10:30 or 11 at night. Isn't that wonderful? This meant that we were required to work long hours. Wonder if this was a Scientology kid. Worship and meditate. No, that's a different one. Worship and meditate with the adults. This also meant that schooling was minimal and there was no age-appropriate censorship to adult-only stuff. Do you guys think for 1 minute that it is a coincidence that all these cults run the same? You really should think about that. ABC, easy as 1, 2, 3. Seen and treated as adults. This meant that we were required to work long hours, worship and meditate with the adults. This also meant that schooling was minimal and there was no age-appropriate censorship to adult-only stuff. The cult leader, a self-proclaimed enlightened master. Watch those MNFers. I don't trust anybody acting like that anymore. Nope. Was seen in an expert. There you go with that expert again. Anytime somebody's like really into being an expert, run. In raising children, despite him not having any children himself, narcissist anyone, or knowing anything about child development, if the cult leader condones an inappropriate, harmful, or even criminal behavior, then his disciples collude. It's triangulation. Because all that matters is what the leader thinks. His truth matters above all truths, and he or she is always above societal rules and norms. Honestly, kind of reminds me of a lot of truthers at this point, including the law. Under these circumstances, children are extremely vulnerable to predators. The objectification of children. In cults, children are either seen as an inconvenience, like in the Sea Org, having children is an inconvenience, or used as means for growing the cult. In both situations, children are seen as objects and not encouraged to develop their own identity. Where have we heard that one before? Last 3 years? Don't be yourself, be something else that you're not? In cults, nothing is in the best interest of a child. Everything is in the best interest of the leader and the organization. Despite this well-known fact, cult leaders will make it seem that everything they do is for your good. That's also the obligation, the guilt, all that. And the good of your children, because then now you owe them. Even if there is plenty of evidence to the opposite, see gaslighting below. They will make you squash your doubts. Oh, in Scientology, that's written into policy. You cannot even question Scientology. Question your sanity and give up everything you have, including your children. Oh boy. Wait, where'd it go? Including your children in the service of the greater good. The greater good. Where have we heard that before, you guys? This is for the greatest good. This greater good has very few winners, which are usually the leader and his inner circle. Circle. Is that like the inner sanctum? Sanctum? A central feature in cults is gaslighting. A term coined from the movie Gaslight, where a young woman is manipulated by her husband into believing that she is descending into insanity. Cults do this on a large scale, which is designed to keep its disciples or followers in a state of perpetual doubt about their opinions and follow the opinions and ideas of the cult leader. It is an exercise in maintaining power over others and abdicating any responsibility for one's actions. Huh. That sounds familiar. For instance, in the cult I grew up in, the self-proclaimed enlightened master would attribute all personal suffering to his disciples and never take any responsibility. This extended to the sexual, financial, and psychological exploitation of his people, including children. When questioned, he would say that you had not surrendered to him enough and that this was your reason for suffering. Like pulling it in? Like when you get essayed as a child in Scientology, you pulled it in. It's always the same thing. Blame the victim. You pulled it in. It was your reason for suffering because you caused it. Leaving. When the child grows up and is lucky enough to leave the cult, she or he will have to contend with a long process of rebuilding or recovering her own identity. Everything that she has been attributed to the cult or exists because of the cult. Sometimes when a former child chooses to leave, her family will want nothing to do with her. Disconnection, anybody? Jehovah's Witness shunning, Mormons shunning. Do you guys know what happens to a lot of the Mormon men that are thrown out of the Mormon churches, various churches? They're so disturbed because they don't have their family anymore and nobody will talk to them that they go and they off themselves. Yeah. Which, by the way, is the plan. Okay, I'm going to start over because I can't remember where I left off. When the child grows up and is lucky enough to leave the cult, she or he will have to contend with a long process of rebuilding or recovering her own identity. Yes. Because they took that from you, by the way. Everything that she has been attributed to the cult or exists because of the cult. And in Scientology, you have to pay a lot of money for it. Sometimes when a former child chooses to leave, her family will want nothing to do with her, or she may need to cut contact with her family to survive psychologically. All of it is mind control. All of it is. The recovery process. Cult recovery is a long and challenging process which requires the right support. Finding a group of like-minded individuals who share similar backgrounds is advisable, as well as finding a therapist who is experienced and knowledgeable about this type of work. Explaining to people what you have gone through is never easy. Former cult members and those who grew up in cults can feel a lot of shame about their past and have difficulty articulating what they have been through. Most people lack an appreciation of what it is like to live in a high control group and its effects. Unless you were in a highly controlled family. Regaining one's mind and setting boundaries. Because you guys know in any cult, boundaries are not allowed. Those who are born or grew up in cults will often need to learn or relearn how to live in society. Although cults range in terms of how isolated and restricted their members are, the indoctrination of children is so deep that it will take a very long time to regain their own mind, learn to think for themselves, and have their own opinions. This extends to knowing one's own preferences, wishes, and needs, because having your own thoughts and opinions was frowned upon or even dangerous. All written into LRH policies, all of it. What would L. Ron Hubbard do? It takes time to regain a sense of safety in doing normal things, having personal preferences, and even feeling entitled to personal space. Growing up in an environment where nothing belongs to you, all the thinking is done for you, and personal space is not a thing. Oh, that's all Scientology. It's all cults, really, but Scientology takes it to the 10th level. Has big implications in later life when it comes to setting personal boundaries. Sam Jahara is a UK CP registered psychotherapist and clinical supervisor. She is experienced in working with the psychological impact of high control groups and cults on individuals, families, and organizations. She has also spoken about her personal experience of growing up in a cult in recent interviews. So that's it, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. The link is in the description. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Peace.